Not many people can say they have played for Manchester United. For those that can, whether you played 963 times like Ryan Giggs, or once like Kieran Lee, the honor of pulling on the famous red shirt is exactly the same. For Daniel Nardiello, he managed 4 matches. The Stourbridge-based forward burst onto the scene with Wolves and played for the FA's School of Excellence at Lilleshall at the age of 14. Having impressed for his club, it wasn't a surprise when rival teams started to show an interest in him, and when United came calling, it was difficult to ignore. United were winning trophies for fun at that time, but Sir Alex Ferguson was always keen for the academy to strengthen and improve with emerging talent. The Reds were one of several sides interested in Nardiello, but the lure of one day playing under the lights at Old Trafford, for the most famous manager in world football, was just too special to turn down. With Nardiello registered under schoolboy terms at Wolves, a Football League appeals committee ordered United to pay £200,000 compensation for his services, including other potential add-ons. On the pitch, meanwhile, it didn't take the frontman too long to progress through the ranks with the Reds, and he turned professional in October 1999. Despite having to wait more than a year to make his debut, it finally came in November 2001. It was in a 4-0 League Cup defeat at Arsenal, as part of a much-changed United side, but for Nardiello, it was an understandably proud moment. Don't get me wrong, looking back at it now from a 40-year-old's perspective, it's something I am extremely proud of that I managed to do. Not many people manage to pull on that shirt and represent Manchester United's first team, Nardiello told the Manchester Evening News. So it's something I look back on with real pride. At the time, I was an 18-year-old kid and you sort of just take it in your stride at that age, so I didn't really realize the achievement of playing for Manchester United's first team until my older age and when I retired. I was a confident young lad and I had confidence in myself to be playing football at the highest level, so his debut just seemed like the next step in my development. And to do it at Arsenal at Highbury is something I am really proud of and something I am glad I wasn't nervous about at the time. When he was coming through at United, Nardiello was training alongside the likes of Roy Keane, Gary Neville and Rio Ferdinand. It was a time when the Reds were winning trophies consistently, so it is somewhat unsurprising that he had to wait a while, more than a year, to be precise, to make his second appearance for the club. Nardiello was working with some of the best footballers in the country, and it was their commitment to winning and attention to detail that was so impressive. Keane, in particular, was someone who the United youngster admired. The Irishman, as is well documented, was desperate to succeed at Old Trafford. He expected the best of himself and his teammates. Yet, despite some of the negative stories about the former Reds captain, Nardiello spoke fondly of his time working with the midfielder, even if he did stop training in the middle of a session, without any sort of warning, during an international break. Keane was unbelievable. If training wasn't right, I actually remember him stopping training a couple of times to make sure the lads were doing the work and doing things right, Nardiello said. He expected 100% effort and commitment from lads all the time in training. I remember it was an international break and there was a lot of reserve team lads training with the first team lads who were not on international duty, and he stopped the session to make sure lads were doing the right things and making sure the passing was correct and that type of thing. But on top of that, it was the encouragement levels he gave you as well. I don't know if people saw this, but the encouragement he gave specifically me was second to none. He guided me in certain aspects and also encouraged me a lot. I remember him playing a couple of reserve team games and it was nothing but good advice and guidance and encouragement. Of course, when things weren't going right on the pitch, he may shout and scream at certain players for not doing things, but that's what leaders do, they expect the best. For me, he's one of the best captains that United have probably ever had, or that world football has ever seen. While Nardiello never actually played with Keane, or even named alongside him in the United matchday squad, he did manage that feat with another Reds legend. In fact, his last appearance for the club came in place of Cristiano Ronaldo, with the attacker replacing the Portuguese ace in the latter stages of a shock 2-0 defeat to West Brom in the 2003-04 Carling Cup. It was Ronaldo's first appearance in the competition, and while it ended in a loss, it was clear how talented he was and what he could bring to Old Trafford. The tricky winger went on to make 346 appearances for the Reds, registering 145 goals and 64 assists. For Nardiello, it was clear that his teammate was destined for greatness, even after a surprise loss to the Baggies. He said, Ronaldo, was clearly an unbelievably talented young lad when I was there. I think when he signed he was 18 or 19. You could see in training and in games that he obviously had a lot of ability and potential, but I don't know if anyone would have predicted how amazing his career would be. The fact that he's probably one of the greatest players to have ever lived, I don't think many people would have predicted that. A lot is down to the guidance he had under Sir Alex, but also down to his own mentality, work rate and belief in himself. To score the amount of goals he has, I don't think anyone who maybe watched him in the first couple of seasons at Manchester United would have predicted the level he actually got to, but fair play to him because he was just an absolute monster and still is. The majority of Ronaldo's appearances for United came as a starter. Nardiello, on the other hand, made just the one start, in the League Cup, but unlike in the other 3 matches he was on the winning side on that occasion. United secured a 2-0 victory over Leicester City in November 2002, with Nardiello in the attack alongside Diego Forlán and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Behind him was Quinton Fortune and David Beckham, while Ferdinand, David May, John O'Shea, Neville and Phil Neville formed the defence. Roy Carroll completed a strong lineup for the Reds, much like the feeling of making his debut for the club, achieving his first start for United, and one that came in a victory, was pleasing for Nardiello. After 3 substitute appearances, and 3 defeats, he was finally part of a winning side under Ferguson. It was great starting a game and again there were no nerves or anything like that, it was just a case of trying to do as well as I could on the day, Nardiello added. Looking back now and looking at the starting lineup from that game, it was a really strong starting 11. With me being probably the weakest link in the starting 11. It was great that Sir Alex had the confidence to put me in and to say I've played alongside those lads. Although I did it in training and a few reserve team matches, it was amazing and something I look back on with pride. With Nardiello having spent time out on loan in the 2003-04 season, it became clear that his time at Old Trafford was starting to come to an end. The striker impressed during a 1-month loan to Swansea City, but it was his stint with Barnsley that really helped to kick-start his career. He scored 2 goals on his debut for the Tykes and bagged 7 times in 16 games before returning to United. Having become a fan favourite with the Barnsley fans, he returned again to Oakwell on a season-long loan for the following campaign. Despite struggling with injuries, Nardiello still managed to 30 games, scoring 7 goals. Upon his return to United at the end of the season, he had an open and honest conversation with Ferguson. The Scotsman offered him the chance to remain at the club, but suggested that it would be better for Nardiello's career if he moved on. In the end, it was decided that he would be released upon the expiry of his contract. I kind of knew it was coming towards an end. I got to a certain age where I was playing regularly on loan at decent-sized clubs, but it wasn't Premiership clubs, Nardiello said. I got called into the office by Sir Alex, had a sit-down with him, and he said he could give me another year, but he said he thought I should go out on a permanent basis and play regular football. I think he was just being kind, saying he could give me an extra year. Looking back, I probably should have said, "Give me that extra year then," but it seemed like the natural end to my time there. I don't think I was upset. It was just one of those things you have to deal with in football. It was an end of an era in terms of leaving Manchester United, but I was just focused on building my career. Given that Ferguson gave him the chance to represent United, Nardiello still has a lot of love and respect for the legendary figure. He suggested it was a privilege to play under him, and recalled a meeting with the Scot years after he had left Old Trafford. It was, in many ways, a perfect anecdote to describe Ferguson the man, rather than the manager. Nardiello added, Ferguson, was obviously a huge success while I was there, and after I left he achieved so much more as well. He's the best manager that's ever lived, and I was lucky enough to play under him, albeit in a handful of games. It was a privilege to work under him and learn from him. He did go into a lot of detail with every individual player. I remember when I was coming towards the end of my football career, I actually bumped into him at the Alexandra Hospital. I was having a checkup on an injury and he was having a checkup on something, and we happened to be seeing the same doctor. He came over to me and said, "You're doing really well, scoring goals at Bury." I was thinking, how does he even know, 10 or 15 years after I'd left the club, that I am at Bury towards the end of my career? How he knew that after however many years it was, to come up to start speaking to me. The physio I was with was in shock. Nardiello, like many former players, reflects on his career with pride. In fact, his first appearance for the club came alongside 2 other debutants, Lee Roche and Jimmy Davis. Given that Nardiello featured alongside both Roche and Davis in the 4-0 defeat to Arsenal in their first showing in a United shirt, he will always be connected to the pair in some way. In August 2003, Davis, who had left the Reds to join Watford on loan, was travelling to Vicarage Road for their opening game of the season against Coventry City when he collided with a lorry and died. He was 21 years old at the time of his death. Understandably, Nardiello admitted Davis' death came as a shock to everyone. It was a difficult period for anyone who knew Davis, but now, nearly 20 years after his death, Nardiello is able to speak glowingly about his former teammates, both as a player, but also as a person. The anniversary of his death always pops up on social media, and you always give him a thought, he said. It was a huge shock, and I know it's easy for me to say now, but he was an unbelievable talent, an unbelievable player. Whether he was at United or somewhere else, he would have had an unbelievable career. He genuinely was excellent, one of the better youth team players for sure. He could even have done it at Manchester United on a regular basis. That's how good he was. It was extremely sad because a guy I've grown up with, played regularly with. He was a great character in and around the changing room, everyone loved him. His family are lovely, they were not too far from where my family are from in the Midlands. Heartbreaking really, really sad what happened there, and may he rest in peace. United paid tribute to Davis during their 2003 FA Community Shield victory against Arsenal, with both teams wearing black armbands during the match. Later in the season, the Reds, at the suggestion of Keane, paid tribute to him once again. After lifting the 2004 FA Cup, the players changed into shirts printed with Davis' name and squad number, which was 36. Davis made just one senior appearance for United, but he was clearly a popular member of the group and played his part in and around the training ground. Like Nardiello, he managed to achieve something that the majority of people can only ever dream of. Playing for Manchester United, at Old Trafford, under Sir Alex Ferguson, was a dream come true for Daniel Nardiello. He managed something special, and no one can ever take that away from him.
Now in this righteous world I have to suffer all around me. I have a handle on how to love you. I have a handle on what to say. True to your heart though, life is such a